it's not, I actually don't mind it because it's like having a prop or a circus act at your show. But you see, for example, you try to have an open debate on campus about Israeli-Palestinian issues, and it would be far worse than anything you just saw. And I think that's terrible for our university system and for our young people to see that as part of their education. I like to think, though, that students are becoming, I will note that most of them, as I said before, most of the folks you saw probably last went to school during the Vietnam War era, which is probably the high point of their lives. But I don't think our young people are following in their footsteps. I constantly see older liberals, my colleagues, constantly angry that the students aren't backing them up in their efforts to protest things. I'll observe, for example, that the biggest club on the Berkeley campus is the Young Republicans Club. I've seen in my time teaching at Berkeley is just how, over the years, the students have become much more pragmatic and less ideological, which I think is very good. I can't say that all the money's being well spent when you spend $50,000 a year to send them to college, and I think sometimes half of them are inebriated in some way, which might be better than having them take lessons from some of the liberal faculty, actually. But I do think that the student body over time has become less ideological, less given to displays of anti-free speech, as you've seen sometimes tonight. So I'd be happy to take your questions.
A couple of comments. When you ask
Say who you are.
Yeah. When you ask your question, state your name. Ask a crisp, quick question, no speeches, and only a single question. And do it for our other little friends in a civil manner. Thank you.
Professor Yu, thank you for coming, and please don't feel that you are unique. I attend many libertarian and conservative meetings throughout the Bay Area where this sort of flash mob is typical. Would you comment on the War Powers Act? I tend to feel it has almost no meaning any longer. What do you think?
It's a good question. It's brought up by the Libya situation, where I'll just observe that President Obama spent much more time trying to get the UN to approve the Libyan intervention than Congress's approval, which gives you a sense of the current administration's priorities. The War Powers Act, for those of you who don't know, was passed in 1973 over President Nixon's veto, and it basically says no president can have troops in hostile environments abroad for longer than 60 days without congressional approval. No president, Republican or Democrat, has ever said that the act was constitutional. No president has ever said that they obey the act. And in fact, they all follow the position of President Nixon that the act's unconstitutional. I actually think it falls to Congress to enforce it, and they can easily do it if they want to. And this is actually part of the framers' design of the Constitution, is that unless Congress pays for a war, it's not going to happen. Back before World War II, before 1945, we didn't have a standing military, so every time the president would have a war, Congress actually had to build the military for that war. It was quite an easy check. Congress had to agree before the president could really wage war. Today, Congress created, with the president's encouragement, obviously, and wish, large standing military, something we never had in our history until after 1945. But even though there's that standing military, which gives the president some initiative, war is so expensive that it just could not be carried out without Congress's approval. So, for example, the Libyan intervention is costing, I believe, $4 million a day. Unless all Congress has to do to stop that from going on is to do nothing. Just don't pass a special appropriations bill, adding more money to the Defense Department to carry out the war, and the war will stop the next day. I think what we really have going on is congressmen don't want to take a stand and say, I'm against that war, and to actually go to the trouble of cutting it off. They'd rather have the president have to exercise the initiative and take the responsibility for good or ill with the fate of the war. It's easier for a congressman to run for re-election without having to take positions on something like that.
Oscar Braun, and I'm the author of the California Bill of Rights. It's an initiative that we launched last year. It's based on the 9th and 10th Amendment. And I'd like to just have you comment. You know, we've heard a great deal in the last few years about the 10th Amendment, but this past year, beyond ourselves, our own little organization, the 9th Amendment is now starting to be recognized as a very important right that has slipped away from us throughout the nation, but especially here in California.
That's it. You know, I'll confess the first article I wrote as a professor was about the 9th Amendment, 17, 18 years ago. It's completely obscure and unread. My article, not the 9th Amendment. But I actually think that would be a very valuable thing to do because for those who don't know, the state constitutions are the exact opposite of the federal constitution. The federal constitution is written on the assumption that the federal government has limited powers that are set out in the Constitution, and it can exercise no other powers than those. And everything else is reserved to the states or the people. Basically what the 9th and 10th Amendments say is the assumption